and welcome to another episode of the Kid Stories Podcast. I'm Phil Bechtel. Before we get started, I want to share another podcast with you that I'm sure you will enjoy. At Kid Stories Podcast, we love mystery stories. That's why the Upside Down Story is one of our favorite new podcasts. It turns a tale flipsy-flopsy upside-downsy so that you need to listen to the clues to figure out who the mystery storyteller is. Search for the Upside Down Story on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts to flex your detective skills and help solve the mystery. Now let's get into some shout-outs. Amelia from Magnolia, Delaware shared some awesome drawings. Great stuff, Amelia. I think if you were a character from the stories, you would be a rose elf who lives in the rosewoods where the rose bushes are as big as trees and they give the elves their magical powers. Thanks for listening, Amelia. And Shankar shared a cool drawing and some excellent story ideas. Awesome, Shankar. Thanks for those ideas. I think if you were a character from the stories, you would be a kid wizard who could bring statues to life. Thanks for listening, Shankar. Today's episode is titled Tea with Fivetails, Part 3. James, Fancy the dog, and Fivetails, the dragon, were successfully transformed into cloud trolls by James's transmogrifying crystal. It was pretty astounding to them that this was even possible, but the proof was right there. They were huge, green-skinned trolls with white hair and beards. And Fivetails the dragon could still fly even in his cloud troll form. This transmogrifying magic was truly astounding. But it had its limitations. Specifically, James didn't know how long it was going to last, and so they flew quickly up to the city in the clouds. James parked his flying scooter, and Fancy stepped off. It was strange seeing a cloud troll acting like a dog, sniffing around everywhere. "Fancy, no sniffing, calm down," James whispered. Troll Fancy whipped her head around to look at James and then trotted over to his side. "Your dog better not give us away to the cloud trolls," said Fivetails. "Fancy will be fine," said James. "I doubt any of the cloud trolls will see her acting strange and think, 'Oh no, that's a dog and a kid and a dragon who temporarily transformed into cloud trolls to steal back the tea we stole.'" Fivetails huffed and led the way into the cloud troll city, trying to rush without it being obvious that they were rushing around looking for something. The cloud troll city looked kind of like a regular town, with buildings and everything, but with clouds everywhere. In some places, you could walk on a sidewalk or a road, and in other places, it was firm clouds. And clouds surrounded the city on all sides. Our three heroes slunk around the place, trying not to act too suspicious, and after a while of searching, they had found nothing useful. They entered into cloud troll restaurants and bookstores and pretty much anywhere. The other cloud trolls didn't seem to suspect anything, but it was only a matter of time before the spell wore off. "This is so random," James whispered to Fivetails. "We're never going to find it just walking around like this." The three stood looking around, and a feeling of helplessness set in. James kind of just wanted to leave. And Fivetails was getting angrier and angrier walking around all the other cave trolls, knowing that any of them could have been the thieves who stole his tea. Suddenly, Fancy jerked her head toward the center of town and began sniffing. "What is it, girl?" James asked. Fancy began walking quickly toward the city center, a place they had so far avoided. As they turned some corners to follow Fancy, they stepped into a huge party taking place in an area downtown. Long tables were set up, and there was an outdoor kitchen area where trolls were roasting meat and cooking food. Large cauldrons bubbled, and cloud trolls were lined up with plates and bowls, filling them with food and setting at the tables to devour their meals. "It's the food," said James. "Fancy smells the food." "Great. I guess she's just going to have a bite to eat while we keep looking," said Fivetails sarcastically. All the other trolls were much too busy eating and hanging out to bother with James, Fancy, and Fivetails. As far as they were concerned, those three were just a few more cloud trolls here for the feast. As Fancy continued sniffing the air, Fivetails started sniffing a little bit too. "What is it?" James asked. "Tea," growled Fivetails. He continued, gently sniffing and slowly walking toward the smell. James followed inconspicuously, trying not to stand out, trying to play it cool. Fivetails walked calmly all the way through the tables and cloud trolls to the other side of the plaza. There, many trolls worked the outdoor kitchens and stoked fires beneath cauldrons and spits stuck with meat. Fivetails made his way to the end where a troll was stirring a huge black cauldron with a long wooden spoon. Periodically, cloud trolls would step up and dip their mugs into the cauldron, filling them with a light green liquid that smelled of lavender and roses. Fivetails stopped in his tracks and gritted his teeth and began breathing heavy, sweat rolling down his green cloud troll forehead. James noticed that Fivetails was ready to blow his top and completely rage out. "Calm down, dude," said James. "If we focus, maybe we can find the rest of the tea that they haven't brewed up yet. And hey, distract the guy who's stirring. I'm going to sabotage that tea." Fivetails wasn't quite sure what James was talking about, but he went along with it. "What's in the cauldron?" Fivetails asked, approaching the cloud troll. This is an excellent rare blend. Some kind of silver-tipped jasmine, I believe. A true delicacy," the cloud troll said. "Do you have a mug I can borrow?" Fivetails asked. The cloud troll reached over to a rack of mugs and got one for Fivetails. As he did, James sneakily took a small leather pouch from his jacket and dumped a big load of brown powder into the cauldron of tea. The cloud troll didn't notice and continued stirring. Fivetails dipped the mug into the tea cauldron and brought it up to his nose, sniffing deeply. "Where did you get a tea this delicious and rare?" he asked. "Oh, it fell off the back of a wagon," the cloud troll answered with a wicked chuckle, nudging Fivetails with his elbow. A line had formed behind Fivetails. He stepped out of the way and many cloud trolls walked by, dipping their mugs into the tea and drinking enthusiastically. James nudged him away from the cauldron and took the tea from his hand, handing it to a cloud troll walking by and saying, "Try this tea, it's delicious." James then turned to Fivetails and whispered, "I just doused that tea with a whole boatload of fart powder. You don't want anything to do with it anymore. Trust me." Fivetails calmed down a bit. He was satisfied that some revenge was being carried out upon these thieves today. The more cloud trolls he saw dipping their mugs into the cauldron of tea, the better he felt. Where's Fancy?" asked James. The two then got a little worried and began looking for Fancy frantically. While she did look like a cloud troll, she was still very much a dog, and who knew what kind of trouble she was getting into. They searched all around the plaza and couldn't find her for some time. Eventually, they found her underneath some tables, picking scraps up off the ground and devouring them. Cloud trolls were messy eaters, so there was a feast down there on the ground, but the other cloud trolls were beginning to wonder what was going on. "Who is this guy down here?" some said as Fancy bumped into their legs under the table. "What are you doing eating off the ground? Just get a plate," they said. James rushed to Fancy and lifted her up by her shoulders out from under the table. Sorry, this is my buddy here. She just loves like food from the ground, or whatever," James stuttered. He couldn't really come up with a good reason on the spot as to why a cloud troll would be eating off the ground, especially when there were plates right there that they could just fill up with food. But mostly the other trolls were still too preoccupied with eating to worry much about it. Until one of them spotted a tail. "Hey, that cloud troll has a tail!" someone shouted and pointed at Fancy. Fancy, being a dog, had no idea what the cloud troll had just said. But James and Fivetails turned and noticed a yellow dog tail sticking out just above Fancy's pants. From everyone else's perspective, it was a cloud troll with a tail. But James and Fivetails knew what this really meant. The spell was wearing off. The end. Thanks for listening, friends. The website, is kidstoriespodcast.com. Send all your drawings and such to kidstoriespodcast@gmail.com. Adios.